Good afternoon, everyone. So I appreciate that you're all probably quite hungry, and this presentation is equal parts Heart of Darkness, like real Heart of Darkness, really despair stuff, sorry, but hopefully some kind of inspiration as well. It's... Well, no, we'll work it out. So we are Naveed and Sam from Project Andiamo, and we want to talk to you about our project. I'm going to regret using Prezi, aren't I? And it's about, when we heard about the theme about sharing craft, we realized we had a bit of a weird story because it was about sharing our pain to create a better experience. And so we want to tell you kind of three what are going to appear to be very different stories and how those things came together for us. So the first story is a dentist called Dr. Andrew Dawood, and he, standard cosmetic dentist, started to realize this whole thing about 3D scanning, 3D printing is kind of cool. It's been used in dentistry for a couple of decades now. And he started to realize that if you had 3D views in medicine, it made surgeries better, diagnosis better. So he kind of took that from dentistry and started to think about kind of other applications in the medical world. And he had a really quite horrific case, Mr. Eric Moga. He had cancer, and the tumor destroyed half his face. He could barely eat. He couldn't go out in public. And Dr. Dawood found out about Eric Moga and realized, if I just scanned one side of his face, I wonder if I could print the other side. So he kind of took that concept from dentistry of scanning someone's jaw and giving them replacement teeth and kind of extrapolated that to creating a facial prosthetic, which resulted in that. And suddenly Eric Moga got his life back. He was able to go back out in public again. He was able to have a far more normal life again. He was able to eat again. These are all things for granted that we just take completely for granted. The next story is about Chris Thorpe, who's super boffin, and he had chickenpox, and in kind of his fevered dream, he's a model train enthusiast, and he's like, model trains are boring. It's a sort of weird hallucination whilst you're having chickenpox, start thinking about model trains, I'm not sure. But he's like, I wonder what would happen if I could make my own. So he decided he was going to go and 3D scan a train, which is an old train from Wales called Winifred, and that's the file. So he complete unrelated. Like, I want model trains. I'm going to scan a steam train, obviously, and I'm going to use lasers to scan it. And then there's us.
So just to give you a little background on ourselves, our craft is caring. We had a disabled child that sadly passed away about 2 years ago now. And, Andiamo was born in 2003, and due to medical negligence, he had cerebral palsy, and he was also quadriplegic, which means that he can't use any of his limbs, and he's totally dependent on an adult to care for all of his needs. As parents of a disabled child, you start to develop quite new skills. So it doesn't matter what your day job is, the skills are how do you care for this child. And suddenly you become an expert in, you become a physiotherapist, you become an OT, you become a speech and language therapist, and then you progress and you become a care manager. You become a special needs data analyst. You become a product manager and a project manager as well, because you've got all of these things that you need to get for him, and you need to work out how the best he gets the care, amongst other lists. And then we found out that we've become also a problem expert. And the problem was the pain that we had to go through, not because of his disability, but to get what he needed. And one of the things that he needed, like one of the orthotics that he needed to keep him straight, is a back brace. If you know anything about scoliosis, it means that you can't stand up straight or sit straight. Your back arches, and you need one of those devices to keep you upright. The problem is not in the device, the problem is in getting the device. So for you who will know anything about orthotics, you need to create a mold to get the orthotic. And for Andiamo, it meant that I would have to keep him still whilst they're measuring him. And to do that, they put a plaster of Paris to do the front bit. And then that's me holding him down. Don't tell the social services. And then wait for it to dry for about 10 minutes. And then turn him over and repeat the process to do the back. An appointment would take about an hour with the child completely distressed and crying because he doesn't understand what you're doing to him and why is this happening. And you can't even explain to him that this is necessary for your own good. You just know that that's what he needs and this is what we have to go through for you to get it. Now, this goes away into a black hole and then it comes back after being produced 13 weeks later. The child doesn't wait to grow until that arrives in 13 weeks. If you've got kids, you know you go through a pair of shoes like every 3 to 6 months. He's already grown. The other problem is plaster of Paris expands as it dries, so you've already got an error in your data, and you're sending it, and you're producing a product with an error, and then you're bringing it back to me to use it. So you're there in your appointment and your dress rehearsal, so to speak, and they're looking at you and they're like, well, if you want me to fix this, it's going to take about another week. Or you could go home and here's some sheepskin and here's some paddings and just, work your way out. Like, okay, I've waited 13 weeks, I'm just going to take it home because I just can't live without this. Without a brace, you're not sitting up straight, so you can't eat. So if you're like this, you can't eat. And with a disabled child, all you could think about is, I can't fall, I don't want to fall. So you're focusing on not falling rather than, let me lift my head up and engage with the world. And without this, you can't fit in a car seat, you can't fit in your chair, you can't stand up, you can't go, it basically limits your life. So you just do anything just to get it, and you go home, and 3 months later, it's already pinching you under your arm, it's pinching your skin because it's not fitted properly. So you're back into the system again, just to go through the whole system again. And that's our pain.
So whether we realise it or not, we become this problem expert. We had become experts across multiple disciplines, and we didn't think about that. You just kind of get on with caring for your kid. You don't realise these things until later. And so how does all of that stuff come together? Who was at Monki Gras last year? Oh, great. Okay. So a lot of you are going to remember Chris's talk. So Chris came on and he's going, yay, model trains. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go get a coffee. This is going to be boring, right? And then he starts talking about lasers. Like, oh, okay, 3D scanning, lasers. Okay, I'm going to stay and listen. So my first reaction is, yay, trains with freaking laser beams. Cool. This is kind of interesting. And then he's like, oh, and then I 3D printed this train. I'm thinking, oh, this is really interesting. I've never thought about scanning a train and then printing it. And then he kind of goes, again, he's gone through his thought process, like, we've scanned this train, I've got this kind of 1 to 25 scale. I wonder if I can kind of print a part of the train. So they printed a standard nylon using laser sintering latch of the train that was about to break. And they kind of went through this thought process, like, wow, we can actually kind of print replacement parts to restore this train. And it was interesting for them because there's always the argument around restoring stuff. It's not exactly the same, but theoretically, if it's a laser scan, it is exactly the same. So, there's kind of restoration thing. And again, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Seen 3D printing before, but haven't really kind of thought about that use of it. It's still just plastic, right? And then he showed that metal. And that was, whoa, hang on a minute. You can 3D print metal? When the hell did that happen? And that's when, and it was literally a light bulb moment. And Chris Adams, I was sitting next to, who made me go to Monki Gras, and I'm very thankful to him for making me go. And I suddenly realized, if you can 3D print a train, then you can start doing wheelchairs, and you can do all sorts of equipment that we know are rubbish and are really expensive. So that, just to produce, okay, this is not doctor's time, none of that stuff, £5,000. And I need 2 of them a year. And it doesn't fit. That doesn't include, like I said, all the other professionals' time around it, just to produce it. And so mind's going, and James saying, we sit down to dinner. And again, just luckily, James had been going and doing what James does, talking to lots of people. And there was literally one seat left, and it happened to be next to me. And I said, I've had such a great conference, and I've really enjoyed myself, been really inspired. I've just had this idea. I'd love to be on stage in 2 years. Just talking about this idea. And James, for those who know him, went, do you think you can do a prototype in a year? Wow. So we kind of hashed it out there on the table. I was like, I have no idea. I'm not a 3D scanner. I'm not a 3D printer. I didn't even know if this is even possible. But hey, we'll try. And we went on this kind of mad journey. And it's 1 year today that we had this conversation. So I left. I went home, and on my way home, I burst into tears because there was this sudden realization that perhaps the last 9 years of pain and grief that we had gone through as a family, we could turn that into something good. We could use that pain to change stuff. And I got home, and I'm babbling away to my wife, and she was like 1 o'clock in the morning. She's like, what the hell are you doing? Trains, lasers, 3D print. Like, what the fuck has happened to you?
Not enough beer.
And, I think she kind of patted me on the head and thought maybe he'll be okay in the morning. And what happened from there is that Project Andiamo was born. And we had a mission to scan, print, and start changing lives. And we met James about a month later, and that kind of nuclear explosion of passion that James has, and he just kind of really pushed us, and we started to believe, do you know what? Maybe we could do this. Maybe we should do this. So we thought, okay, let's start working this out. So we started we needed to collaborate, we needed to co-create, and we realized, hey, crap, we're kicking ass here. We're actually doing stuff that nobody in the world has been able to do yet. People are 3D printing cups and vases and like all that crap. No one's actually trying to do this properly, to do something meaningful for mankind. So when it kind of really, we were doing a lot of research, still working full-time, trying to do this part-time, how the hell is this thing going to make money? Shoreditch Works have their Kickstarter. They meet their stretch goal. They're going to give out free desks. And we think, we look at the other applications and we're like, nobody's going to vote for us. There's some like proper companies here. We're just got random ideas still, until we get that email saying, you've got desks. And then it's like, oh crap, we've got an office. We better start really doing something, right? Because we've now got space. So 3 weeks after that, Bethnal Green Ventures ring us up and go, guys, the application's only closed. We've heard about you guys. You've come and spoken to us a few months ago. Why the hell haven't you applied? And we go and meet them, and we say, well, we're not going to make any money. Why the hell would anyone invest in us? Now, if anyone's starting a business, don't start an investment conversation like that. It doesn't... terrible idea. It gets even worse than that. So we put our application in, because it's a weird situation. Someone's pushing you to apply for money. And we go for our interview, and we go through the entire interview, and they ask us, and we're actually in LA whilst we're at a 3D scanning conference. And they say, have you got any questions? And I blurt out, I still don't understand why you're going to invest in us. Again, if somebody's giving you money, don't ask them why the hell are they giving you money. But it was so surreal at that moment. So 1 year ago, James said, can you do a prototype in 1 year? So sorry, we didn't. We did it in less.
So we made friends with Cavendish Imaging, who are partners to Dawood and Tanner, the dentist doctors, and actually they're like next door to each other. And basically we said to them, would you mind using your wonderful scanners? And that's a 3D MD scanner that they use to scan people's faces to do their dentistry. And we said, we've got this hand splint, can you scan it for us so we could produce a 3D model of it? And they went, yeah, sure. And they did that for us. They were very kind and they played around with the images and they did more than what we asked them to. And they printed us, we sent it to Digit to Widgets, one of their fantastic 3D scanners, 3D printers, don't ask me the name of it, I don't know, I just know that it prints. And we got our first prototype. This is just to prove that I could take one item and copy it, and it didn't take 13 weeks. It took a day to do this. So that's problem number one solved. But then we thought, well, whilst this is printing, and well, we do have Chris Thorpe sitting next to us at BGV, and he does have a maker bot, and we are kind of friends now. Could we do something with his printer? And 3 hours later, we got another prototype. So we've got two James, not just one.
Now, the amazing thing about this is when Chris kind of said, let's just give it a try, I thought there's going to be a real difference in quality. Now, this has been printed at its kind of lowest resolution, and actually, there's not a huge difference, but the price difference is enormous. I mean, this has cost us a couple of £100 to go through the R&D just to create that, but we know we can bring the cost down significantly. That, in material, cost £5. Wear and tear and all that stuff, 70 quid, 75 quid. And remember, when they talk about cost savings in the NHS, it's not usually things, it's time. That's what costs money. So if you can reduce these things from 13 weeks, you're potentially saving enormous costs, let alone all the kind of changes you're making to that family's life. Because all the time you don't have those things, those orthotics, the condition's getting worse. So, we've got 3 months funding. We've gone from sitting at a dinner table, talking about trains and lasers, to printed orthotics. Bethnal Green Ventures has taken a risk on us. We're now, the biggest thing we've realized is all of this technology, do you know what? It doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how cool it is. If you haven't got a service around it, it doesn't matter. It's worthless. And that's our biggest realization. We started off going, we're just going to prove this and show it's possible, and everyone's going to kind of take up the torch and run with it. Nah, we've got to do it. Because no one else is going to. The NHS isn't going to. We've got to create that service. So we're now got partnerships, putting them together with universities like Kingston, Ravensbourne. We're talking to hospitals around the country to start talking about prototype services. But we have no bloody idea how we're going to fund it.
Show me the money.
So, yeah. She's a negotiator. It's in the Arab blood. Negotiating with Arabs is a scary situation. Anyway.
Just show me the money.
So where we are now, we've got three things. We've done stage one, which is to show that it's even possible. Step number two is to scan a person who needs it, which is happening in about 3 weeks, and print them an orthotic. And the third one is to create the kind of theoretical service around it. And we're starting to speak to 3D scanners and 3D printers in London to create a London-based service. But now the next stage really is how the hell do you fund that going forwards? So, thank you for...
Thank you.
So it's a bit like being at my wedding where I'm saying, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry. Failing. So thanks. Any questions?
I know in the U.S. There'd be a ton of regulatory BS you'd have to go through to even be able to provide these things to people. Will it be easier in the U.K.?
So to make it clear, we're not redesigning anything.
Yet.
We're not making anything new. These exist from about even more than 100 years ago. All we're doing is showing that you can produce it quicker and more accurately.
Although I'll tell you guys,
For now.
I'm not allowed to normally talk about this because I get told off. But yeah, no, she's going to tell me off. But it's Monki Gras, and I kind of trust you guys. It's okay. Bet you'll protect me from her. No. So.
That shovel we talked about? Maybe we can 3D print one.
Yeah, no. So we are completely focused on these first prototypes, and there's something called substantial equivalence in regulatory law in Europe, which is if you can show that your medical thing is the same as something else, and it's weird because it seems to be a completely objective discussion, you can actually kind of keep on going with your product. But there's this kind of weird line that you cross where you're no longer substantially equivalent. So when we've kind of proven the process, we want to start looking at the redesign, because actually the design of them are absolute shite. They really are. They're terribly designed. And you can go for like honeycomb structures. You may have seen honeycomb versions of for broken bones and stuff like that. The other thing I'm really excited about, and again I'm going to get in real trouble, is how, if you have a child who can't talk, okay, can't communicate with you, all we had to become translators because it was a flicker in our son's eyes, a slight smirk, that we understood what was going on. How do you explain that? How do you give that knowledge to someone else? What if you start putting sensors in these things? Pressure sensor, temperature sensor. Can you start to give a voice to someone who can't talk? What can you start to do with the data from the scan? Because all this data, and it's really important medical data, it's scribbled down on a piece of paper and thrown away in a folder somewhere. What happens when you've got a data set for several hundred kids and how their condition is developing? I don't know. But again, no one's looking at it in the physical world. All this data about drug trials and stuff, this is real physical stuff. And it makes a massive difference. Bloody hell, yes. Thank you. God, yeah, so, you know.
We're fucking convinced, how can we help?
Honestly, we don't, we're working that out. I mean, we've kind of grabbed onto it or something, I don't know. Grabbed, is that? Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to work out how much it's going to cost us to keep on going, how much money do we need. It would be great if we can get funding from a university or something like that to kind of keep on going. We've tried to do it part-time, it doesn't work. Ask us in 4 weeks, we'll have an answer for you.
Tell us in 4 weeks.
Okay, very good point. There's our details. I've now got off the screen, of course. Please, email us, tweet about us, ring us, come and see us at Bethnal Green Ventures. We are... So one of our most annoying things that we've gone through, we've had to speak to IP lawyers, and they've gone, shut up, stop talking, go and patent it. And we're going, no, you've completely missed the point of what we're trying to do. We don't want to patent it. We want to open source this knowledge. I mean, can you imagine that in 5 years, if you could take a 3D scan with your iPhone in the middle of nowhere, and you could have an orthotic printed and sent to you? Why do I want to patent that?
You should patent it for license.
Well,
Or someone screws you. You want to patent it so some other asshole
well,
doesn't.
well,
Once it's in the internet, they can't do it.
well. So one of the things we're going through is we're publishing as we go along, so you can't patent it. Again, we want to start speaking to people like Scope. I mean, at the moment, it's just kind of 2.5 our colleague Lee Prevost doing this. I mean, we are 4 weeks in now to actually have someone giving us some money. We've done a hell of a lot in that time. There's a lot of more conversations to go, though.
Do you have a formal vehicle for investing or donation?
So we are a limited company called Project Andiamo. We exist now. We would like to set up a charitable arm to create the orthotics for children, but realistically, that's probably about 6 months away. But our initial, we already have initial investment for Bethel Green Ventures, but it's just enough for 3 months.
I need the charity. Of course, it gives money to things like that, but I need the charity.
Okay.
Steve is
So it
Sorry.
seems like there's a large financial gap between what it used to cost to make them and what you actually cost to make them. And
Yep.
I know you keep saying you're not going to make any money, but it seems like even with just the amount of these that need to be made and that huge amount between 15,000 and 300 pounds or whatever it was, or 100 pounds, you could charge, you said it was, how much was it to make that?
That's $5,000.
So $5,000? No, how much was it to make the one that you
Oh, that costs about, in total, £300 including the scanning.
300 pounds,
Yeah.
pounds including the scan, so 600 pounds? I mean, you double the price, you save the families a ton of money, and you've got money to invest back into your company. It's not like you're doing it because you want to get rich,
Yeah.
it's just,
So that model would work in the US, but 99.99% of these are funded by the NHS here. We've got to persuade the NHS.
but so you're saving, okay, okay.
And that, I mean, no, you're right, but I mean, we've started to look at the kind of health economics, and it's actually really
But
complex.
what if, so I know, but it's, okay, so let's just do a quick session on the British healthcare system. Is it possible in the British healthcare system to pay outside? Like you can go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so,
How many families do you think would pay?
We did. We had different orthotics, and that cost us about £4,000 because we went elsewhere, and it was something that the NHS didn't. They thought it wasn't in their standards of their medical agreement, and they didn't think that it would work. And it was like a new idea of different orthotics. And we paid for it because they would just not even answer my calls when I asked about it.
so the short answer
people
is,
would pay.
yeah, the market's there, and we've already started those conversations.
Okay, good.
But
You're actually saving those families a ton
Yeah,
of
yeah,
money.
no.
If you never make the product, then you haven't saved them anything.
Absolutely.
So the most, it's like a happy parent. If you don't have happy parents, the rest of the family's shit. So like, if you
angry as fuck. I mean, I'm an angry guy, but. No.
when the parents don't spend time together and the marriage falls apart, everybody's unhappy, right? So the same thing here. Like, if you don't take a little bit of money so that you can start making the orthotics, nobody wins.
No,
Yeah.
we understand that. We do need money to keep on going. We're not saying no
and
to
we
money.
need to sell. No.
My point is charge without feeling guilty, because it's actually doing a lot of good to charge. That's my point.
Only if people can afford it.
So there's families I'm sure I wouldn't be able to afford. There's no charge there. That's why we
Which is, well, but that's also the charity arm. So, I mean, so we're going into kind of business models now, and I really am stopping you from lunch, but there are three thinkings at the moment. One is kind of funds and grants. Two is private. And third is kind of having some ability to access charitable funding for the stuff the NHS doesn't do.
Well, in the future, it's the same with everything, though, right? The future's not here; it's just not distributed. The future's here; it's just not distributed evenly.
That's exactly right. We've shared the craft. Now we need to scale it.
Yeah.
So
So it's
Steve, your help is going to be much appreciated.